The first sign of trouble wasn't the violent shaking, it wasn't the oxygen masks dropping from the ceiling or the sudden scream slicing through the cabin. It was the silence from the engines, a deep, unnatural silence that swallowed the sky whole. 37,000 feet above the earth, somewhere over a cold stretch of ocean, Flight 782 lost both engines, and in row 8, a quiet single father slowly opened his eyes. Before we step into what happened next, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the idea that ordinary people can carry extraordinary courage inside them, then like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that heroes don't always sit in the cockpit. Row 8 had been unremarkable at boarding. A tall man in his early 30s, broad-shouldered but slightly stooped as if carrying invisible weight, had taken the window seat. His name was Daniel Reeves, 34 years old, with tired gray-blue eyes and short dark hair that hadn't been properly styled in weeks. He wore a simple navy hoodie over a faded t-shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots. His hands were rough, calloused in a way that didn't match his quiet demeanor. Beside him sat his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, her small frame wrapped in a pink cardigan, her light brown curls tied into a loose ponytail. She clutched a stuffed rabbit missing one eye. They were flying home after a hospital appointment in another state. Lily had been born with a heart condition. The doctors had said the surgery was successful, but follow-ups would last years. Daniel had sold nearly everything after his wife passed away 3 years earlier at the house, his motorcycle, even his collection of old aviation memorabilia. He now worked double shifts at a shipping warehouse, saving every dollar for Lily's treatment. No one on that plane knew that once upon a time, Daniel Reeves had worn a different uniform. When the engines failed, the plane didn't drop immediately. It glided. A strange, floating sensation filled the cabin. The usual mechanical roar disappeared, replaced by wind scrapping along the fuselage. Then came the chime. A flight attendant's voice tried to steady the cabin, but fear spreads faster than reassurance. People grabbed hands, whispered prayers, cried openly. Daniel didn't panic. His eyes moved instinctively toward the wing. He watched the angle. He listened to the silence. His breathing slowed instead of quickening. Lily looked up at him, confusion clouding her small face. He placed his hand over hers, steady and warm. In the cockpit, chaos simmered beneath training. Both engines had flamed out after a rare fuel contamination issue. Restart attempts failed. The captain radioed for emergency assistance. Air traffic control scrambled to reroute nearby aircraft. Coincidentally, 2 fighter jets from a nearby air base were already conducting exercises within range. They were redirected immediately. Within minutes, the fighter pilots were flanking the crippled airliner, assessing damage visually. Their voices crackled over the emergency frequency. They needed to coordinate glide trajectory and identify possible landing options. The nearest runway was barely within theoretical gliding distance, but only with precise angle control and minimal drag. The captain made a public announcement, voice tight but controlled, explaining they were working through a mechanical issue. He asked if there were any trained pilots on board. No one moved at first. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. The past he had buried pressed against his ribs. He had promised himself he would never return to that world. After his wife's death, after the night he had chosen duty over being home when she collapsed, he had resigned from the Air Force. He had been one of the youngest squadron leaders at his base. His call sign had been known across 3 deployments. He squeezed Lily's hand. She looked up at him with complete trust. He pressed the call button. When the flight attendant approached, he spoke quietly, almost reluctantly. He showed his old military ID, still tucked in his worn wallet. It hadn't been thrown away. Maybe he had never truly let go. Minutes later, he was escorted to the cockpit. The fighter pilots, circling the aircraft, were requesting confirmation of who was assisting. Through layered static, one of them asked for the onboard pilot's call sign. In the cockpit, Daniel slipped into the right seat. His hands hovered over the controls. He spoke calmly, assessing instrument readings with a precision that surprised the captain. His posture changed, the stoop vanished, his shoulders squared. He gave the air traffic controller his name. There was a pause. Then one of the fighter pilots responded with disbelief in his voice. Recognizing it, he asked again, more clearly this time, requesting the call sign. Daniel hesitated only a second before answering. The cockpit fell silent for half a breath as recognition traveled through the radio. The fighter pilot's voice shifted from procedural to personal respect. Years ago, Daniel had trained him during his first combat rotation. He had been known for impossible landings on damaged runways, for bringing jets home with systems half-functional. His calm under pressure had saved lives. Now he was in a crippled commercial airliner, gliding without power. The challenge was merciless. They had one chance at the runway. Too shallow, and they'd stall. Too steep, and structural stress could tear the aircraft apart. Daniel calculated glide ratio against wind speed, factoring weight distribution and remaining altitude. He requested the fighter jets to check flap positioning externally for any asymmetry. Lily sat in row 8, unaware of the full gravity of the moment. A flight attendant knelt beside her, holding her small hand. She kept her eyes fixed on the cockpit door, believing with childlike certainty that her father could fix anything. Inside, Daniel felt the old conflict tearing through him. The sky had taken his wife, or at least that's what he had believed. He had been flying a humanitarian escort mission overseas when she collapsed from an undetected aneurysm. He hadn't been there. The guilt had wrapped around him like barbed wire. Flying again meant reopening that wound. But this wasn't about him. This was about the 184 souls behind him. This was about Lily. The runway appeared on the horizon, a thin gray line framed by coastline. They were slightly high. Good. Better high than low. He adjusted pitch gently, conserving energy. The aircraft felt heavy but obedient. The captain followed his commands without ego. Training meant experience in a fragile alliance. The fighter jets peeled slightly outward, giving clearance. One pilot continued to feed wind data. At 2,000 feet, the cabin crew braced passengers. Screams rose again as the ground rushed closer. Daniel blocked out everything except the numbers. Airspeed, angle, crosswind correction. At 500 feet, a gust pushed the nose left. He compensated smoothly. The runway threshold expanded in the windshield. For a second, the silence was total. The wheels struck harder than a normal landing but aligned. The plane bounced once. Daniel corrected without oversteering. They rolled fast, engines still dead, relying solely on braking force and reverse momentum systems. The runway blurred past. Finally, friction won. The plane slowed and stopped. For a long moment, no one moved. The world seemed suspended between disbelief and relief. Then the cabin erupted sobs, applause, prayers, laughter collapsing into tears. Daniel exhaled slowly, hands still gripping the controls. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft. Doors opened. Passengers evacuated with shaking legs and overwhelmed hearts. When Daniel stepped back into the cabin, Lily broke free from the attendant and ran to him. He lifted her into his arms, burying his face in her hair as the weight of the moment crashed over him. He hadn't just landed a plane. He had confronted the ghost he'd been running from. News of the emergency spread quickly. Reporters gathered at the airport. The fighter pilots, now landed as well, requested to meet him. When they saw him, their respect was unmistakable, not because he had once been their squadron leader but because he had chosen to step forward when silence would have been easier. Daniel didn't seek cameras. He declined interviews. He simply wanted to take Lily home. But something shifted inside him that day. He realized that the sky hadn't taken his wife. Fate had. And hiding from the sky hadn't honored her memory. Facing it had. In the weeks that followed, letters poured in from passengers. One elderly woman wrote that she had been flying to meet her first grandchild and believed she wouldn't make it. A college student said she had decided to forgive her estranged father during the glide, realizing life was too fragile for pride. Strangers thanked him not just for landing a plane, but for reminding them what courage looks like. Daniel returned to work at the warehouse. But something in his posture had changed. The stoop was gone. Lily's surgery checkup showed continued improvement. At night, instead of avoiding aviation documentaries, He watched them again with her curled beside him. He didn't re-enlist. That chapter was closed, but he began volunteering at a local flight academy, mentoring young trainees about responsibility, resilience, and the weight of command decisions. He spoke not of heroism, but of preparation and love. Because in the end, that's what had guided his hands. Not pride, not reputation, but love. Before we close, if this story touched your heart even a little, please take a second to like the video, share it with someone who believes ordinary people can rise in extraordinary moments, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of humanity's quiet strength. And right now, I want to ask you something special. Comment the word courage below if you believe strength isn't loud, it's steady. On that silent runway, under flashing emergency lights and fading sunset skies, a quiet single dad from row 8 proved that sometimes the bravest people are the ones who don't announce themselves. They simply rise when needed. And somewhere above the clouds, the sky felt a little less heavy.